If anyone qualifies to write about our service to our country for 8 years, 2015 to 2023, Femi Adesina does, because he was there from the beginning to the end. It is one way to combat revisionism and set records straight. A country must have records to protect its history. These were the words of former President Muhammadu Buhari, speaking about the book written by my guest today, titled Working with Buhari, Reflections of a Special Advisor, Media and Publicity, 2015 to 2023. There is a certain narrative, he says, that has been sold to the Nigerian public, and that book sought to correct that narrative. Did it succeed in doing that? Today on the program, we take a look back at one of the most controversial periods of Nigeria's democratic rule, the Muhammadu Buhari administration. Hello and welcome to Political Paradigm on Channels Television. I am Kayla Megwa. My guest on the program is Mr. Femi Adesina, the former Special Advisor, Media and Publicity to former President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari. Born in Osun State, Mr. Adesina is first and foremost a journalist, starting his career as a writer for Radio Nigeria. He went on to write for the Vanguard newspaper, the National Concord newspaper, and then the Sun newspaper, where he rose to the rank of editor-in-chief. He went on to become the president of the Nigerian Guild of Editors. It was at that point he was asked to come back and work for President Buhari's administration. And the rest, as we say, is history. Mr. Femi Adesina, welcome to Political Paradigm.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Let's talk a bit about that book and what is sought to address. I don't have a copy yet, by the way.
Oh, really?
I don't have a copy. What we were able to get were excerpts from the book, but until we sort this problem out, let's talk a bit about what is sought to address. Why did you write that book?
Okay, I promise you will get a copy of that.
Thank you.
On me. Okay. Here's why did I write that book all my life, all my career. Since I left school, I have been a journalist, and I've been at the writing and reporting end of journalism. So, having then worked with a president for 8 years, the very least I could do was to put down my experience on paper. And that was what I did. I needed to write about working with the president of the country for 8 years. And more so because there were some narratives that were not quite right about that president and about who he is, about what drives him, his passion, and all that. So I felt, yes, since I've experienced him firsthand, I should try to correct some of the misconceptions, some of the misperceptions, and then put in bold relief some of the things he has done for the country. That was why I wrote the book.
So let's talk a bit about those misconceptions. What are they?
Yeah, one and very, very important was that he was a nepotist. You know, one thing they talked about Buhari was his nepotism. Nepotist? No. I didn't see that in all 8 years of working with him. Rather, each time he did something, he had a national explanation for it. There were things he would ask me to do, make some appointments, and I would look at the names and say, Mr. President, why not this, why not that? And he would explain the things that drove him to make the appointments to me. And I will understand. So all that talk about nepotism, bringing people from his own part of the country, they were perceptions people just had about him. Anybody he appointed, there was good enough reason for that appointment. So that's one, nepotism. Another one was that a religious bigot. Really? If anybody was a religious bigot, you know, if you were as close to him as I was. I never saw a scintilla of religious bigotry in him. Rather, what I remember clearly was that the first Christmas we spent together, that was 2015 December. He called me. He said, the vice president is a church person. I know you too, you are a church person. Why don't you go for this season? Go and be with your family. Spend Christmas with them. When you now come back in January, I too will take some days and go and rest. A bigot never wants to hear about any religion that is not his own. That's who a bigot is. Any religion that is not his own, he will not even brook that religion about it. He will not recognize it. Not to talk of you go and spend Christmas with your family because you're a Christian. And that was the trend throughout our 8 years. All of us that worked closely with him, whenever it was any Christian festival, he gave us permission to go and stay with our families, while those who are Muslims will stay with him. And yet, they will say it's a religious bigot. So there were so many things they said about President Buhari that so many times they will say he was an unforgiving person. Rather, I would say he was too forgiving. Too forgiving. In the morning like this, I will watch the talk shows, I will see people abusing President Buhari, abusing his father, abusing his mother. And then I will get to his house in the evening, I will see those same people seated at dinner with him. He was too accommodating and too forgiving. So there were so many things that Nigerians needed to know about that president. For instance, a certain part of the country felt he didn't like it, which was not so. I'm glad I got the testimony of the former managing director of MBET, who was from the Southeast. The testimony she gave about how she got the job and how President Buhari supported her throughout her stay on the job, despite being from the Southeast, is something everybody needs to hear and everybody needs to know, to show you that the man harbors no grudge against any part of the country.
That's interesting. And you did point out a few of the narratives out there. One of the narratives that was out there, still out there, is the fact that he basically took too long to get things done.
Which was his style. If you were here during his regime, military, one thing he used to say then was, this administration will not be rushed. It was a common saying when he was a military head of state, because a lot of people felt he was rather slow. But he said it was better to be slow than to make mistakes. So he takes his time before he does things. And it's still reflected in his leadership, even as a civilian president. He would take his time and make sure that nobody was unjustly treated, nobody was injured, nobody was disparaged by things he did. Therefore, he made sure that he got things right before he did it.
I mean, that's all well and good, but the problem is, afterwards, a lot of people are very disappointed with this, especially when it came to the creation of his cabinet. And then we saw people put in particular offices. The fact that he took his time, for many people, and I do have to tell you this, myself included, he takes his time because he wants to make the right choices. Afterwards, a lot of people are pretty disappointed with what we're seeing concerning a lot of the people that made up that cabinet. When the beating starts, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, Kayla, thank you. My problem with what you have just said, that it is not scientific. I would have agreed more with you if you came out with the statistics of, out of 200 million Nigerians, these are the number that was disappointed. But you don't have that. So you are just surmising. How do you know that is the majority of the people that were disappointed? How do you know that majority of the people were not okay with the choices? So that conclusion is not scientific. And that is the problem with it.
Another thing is, the Buhari administration ran on the anti-corruption. I may not be able to give you the figures of all the people who are upset. We haven't done that. But what we did know about the Buhari administration was that it ran on the anti-corruption campaign. That was the center. And at the time when he came into office, a lot of people who supported the government, that was what they had in mind, anti-corruption. He is a man of honor. He's a man who will fight corruption. We heard the Archbishop of Canterbury even give him kudos during his administration, first term. I remember that meeting. Well, it was a cocktail thing that was happening in England. And I remember the Bishop of Canterbury said, no, they said the country was fantastically corrupt. And he said, no, the man in charge right now, he's different. He's going to handle all of that. I know you remember this particular, because there was a lot of talk about it in the country at the time. But then afterwards, there are many areas in this country and many quarters who feel that for a government that ran on anti-corruption, the amount of corruption charges that we're hearing about, not on him in particular, but on some people who were part of his cabinet, on some people who were part of governance during his time, it is pretty disappointing for a lot of people. What do you make of that assertion?
It would be disappointing when there are convictions. There are indictments and there are convictions. Well, it will be disappointing for those people involved. But when we are still at the level of allegations and charges and questioning and all that, it will be premature to come to a conclusion. One thing that is crystal clear was that President Buhari built his administration on 3 planks. 1, we will keep the country safe, we will secure the country. 2, we will revive the economy. And 3, we will fight corruption. Those were the 3 foundations on which the administration were laid. And I tell you, he worked with 2 chairmen of the EFCC. I think before Bauer, there was Marco. Just check the records. Check between 2010 and 2014, the number of convictions for corruption. And then check between 2015 and 2022, 2023. You will see that it was more than treble, more than quadruple of what happened before the administration. So, to the best of his ability, I would say the Buhari government fought corruption. There is no single government anywhere in the world that will do everything that needs to be done in the country. In fact, China executes people for corruption. The fact that they continue to execute shows that corruption is not eradicated in that country. So there is hardly a country that will be able to eradicate corruption, but you will do a lot to curtail it, and that was what the Buhari administration did.
So let's look at the administration in its totality. Maybe take it segment by segment and take a look at some of the things that happened during that time of government. When it comes to handling insecurity in the country, could you talk to us a bit about some of the achievements that were made during the Buhari administration in the area of insecurity?
Yes, when I talk about the achievements of that administration, I try to segment them into tangibles and intangibles. Intangibles are the successes that are there, but that you can touch. You can feel them, you can touch them. And the tangibles are the ones you can see: roads, airports, infrastructure generally. Security will come under intangible, because just reflect, cast your mind back to May 2015 when President Buhari took office. How was the country then in terms of security? That was a time you weren't sure what would become of Nigeria the next day. Bombs went off in different parts of the country daily, in schools, in motor parks, in mosques, in churches, everywhere. There were bombings everywhere, everywhere. He came in and he directed the military to take the center of the battle to the northeast, which was the epicenter of the insurgency there. And if you want to be honest, mark my words, if you want to be honest, and you are not just cavilling, finding faults unnecessarily, you will agree that that insurgency went down. It was not finished. It was not concluded by 2023, but it had been reduced drastically. By 2015, you were not sure of what would become of Nigeria. The South-South was resting. Southeast resting. Northwest resting. Northeast resting. North Central resting. Southwest was resting because your Yoruba Nation thing came. And you wouldn't even think of what will happen to Nigeria. But the fact that President Buhari kept the country together throughout those 8 years, and he could hand over to a successor, I believe is a big achievement. Intangible, but very, very significant. That's in the area of security for me.
Okay, let's talk about the economy. It's interesting that you mentioned, but before we get there, I just wanted to bring something to your notice. You know, the last episode, I think we spoke to some of the co-founders. I think, yes, we spoke to a co-founder of the Bring Back Our Girls movement, and they were talking about his handling of the situation. And he did get some knocks, but they did give him some kudos, you know, because a lot of the girls were brought back. And other kidnapped victims were also brought back during his time as president. But let's take a look at the economy. What were some of the milestones that, in your view, were achieved during his time in office in the economic aspect of things, bringing a better standard of life for the Nigerian people?
For me, the most significant, I'll say, is the fact that the Nigerian economy finally got diversified. Since 1960, we had a mantra: we will diversify the Nigerian economy. There was hardly any government that came that didn't promise to diversify the economy. But it was all promises, all promises. When the Buhari administration came in 2015, our economy still revolved around oil. So whenever the prices of oil fell, crashed in the international market, Nigeria simply crashed with it. That was what happened. Before he got in, about 2014, oil was selling for as high as $144 per barrel. At the time, it stabilized at $100 per barrel. But by 2015, when it came, it crashed to $37 per barrel. And the Nigerian economy simply crashed with it. And President Buhari was determined that Nigeria would no longer need to depend on oil solely. So he focused on agriculture. He spent a lot of money on growing rice, on growing wheat, on growing the grains generally. We used to import beans even from Burkina Faso in West Africa here. But under Buhari, we stopped importing rice and all the other grains because he spent a lot of money on those products, and the Nigerian economy became diversified away from oil. It got to a point that our GDP had oil contributing just 9%. Oil used to contribute over 90% of Nigeria's GDP. But under Buhari, oil was contributing just 9%. So that was a lot of success in that area.
So let's talk a bit about infrastructure. You touched on it not too long ago, but just so we can be able to say these were the structures, the basic infrastructure that was put in place during the administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari. Could you walk us through some of them, just so Nigerians can remember?
Yes, I think that one of the greatest legacies of President Buhari was what he did on infrastructure. By infrastructure, I'm talking of roads, I'm talking of bridges, I'm talking of airports, I'm talking of so many things. Look at the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. For those of us in this side of the country, we are on that road like weekly. There was a time it took us 3 hours from Ibadan to Lagos. There was a time I went to Oshogbo before the administration. I spent 6 hours on the road. Now, go to Ibadan. In 1 hour, you are there. Go to Oshogbo. In 2 hours, you are there. Because it fits the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, which had been under works for many decades. Many decades. Then, other roads around the country, you had the Enugu Port Harcourt Expressway. You had the local Oweto Bridge in the non-central part of the country. You had the second Niger Bridge. You had airports in Kano. You had in Port Harcourt, and you had in Lagos, brand new airports. So, in terms of infrastructure, you cannot beat the Buhari administration. He focused a lot on infrastructure, and those things are there for us to see.
Let's talk a bit about diplomatic relations.
Yes.
Especially within Africa and within West Africa in particular, because, you know, we are looking at a lot of situations going on in West Africa right now that, I like the word disappointing. They're very disappointing. And the economic growth in that region has not exactly, we've not seen. I remember when he signed AFTA, when he signed the free trade agreement, and we were so optimistic that, oh, wealth is coming to West Africa. Let's talk a bit about those diplomatic relations. How do you think he, you know, what kind of successes did he garner for the country in that regard?
You will recall that even as a military leader, President Buhari used to say then that Africa was the centerpiece of Nigeria's
foreign policy.
Yes, and even as a civilian president, 30 years after, that was still primary. Africa was primary to him. And that was why Nigeria stood behind any African country that had issues. If you know for how long Nigerian troops were in Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Bissau was actually stabilized by Nigerian soldiers. And you had that all over the continent. Anywhere there were issues, there was threat to democracy, you could be sure that Nigeria was there under President Buhari. And when it came to economic issues, he even was president of ECOWAS at the time during his tenure. So anything that was Africa got attention from the president.
You know, sometimes when I think back on his 8 years in office, you know, there was so much that happened in those 8 years in so many sectors. And I mean, we've talked about infrastructure, we talked about, you know, diplomatic relations, we talked about the economy. One other area that we haven't really talked about is education.
Yes, what about?
In the education sector, because at the time when he came in, I remember hearing promises of how our education sector was going to be at par with the ones around the world, and the need to travel abroad to, you know, get an education would be, you know, not so fashionable anymore because you can get that level of education here in Nigeria. That was one of the promises that he made at the time. But one thing that we did see was a lot of japa during the Buhari administration. We even started calling it a syndrome, the japa syndrome in Nigeria. What would you say happened?
No, japa had always been there in Nigeria. It had always been there. The intensity of it may increase from time to time or reduce from time to time, but it had always been there. And what I said then, and I still maintain now, is if you have opportunity to go abroad to better your lot, why not go? Why not go? But Nigeria remains your country. You then come back sooner or later to add value to this country. So there's nothing really bad about JAPA in terms of young people going out, going to add value to themselves, and then coming back to add value to the country later. Nothing wrong.
Okay, that's interesting because many people were worried about it, the brain drain that's caused, especially in places like the medical field.
Yes, I remember Dr. Chris Ngige, who was Minister for Labor and Employment, and who is also a medical doctor, defending this on your program, Sunrise Daily. I watched him, I listened to him that morning, and he said there was nothing wrong with it for medical doctors to go out, improve themselves, get empowered, and then come back to serve their country. There was a lot of condemnation of him then, but it's a reality.
You know, when you watch the news in recent times and the Buhari administration keeps getting a bashing, as someone who was a spokesperson for that administration, how do you feel when you hear all of that bashing that happens? And, you know, what's your take on that?
Is there any government in this country that has not got bashings? None. None. There is no government since 1960 in this country that has not got bashings. So it doesn't bother. Doesn't bother at all. Because facts are facts, truth is truth. And those who want those facts, the facts are on record. And truth is there. The more you try to deride the truth, the more it stares you in the face. It's always there.
On your job as spokesperson, you know, that conversation actually came up recently, not about you in particular, but the job of a spokesperson. You know, I think it was a conversation about young people in Nigeria, and a lot of people want to be SA media. They want to be SA this, they want to be this. But the job of a spokesperson of a government is a long line of shoes that you needed to fill by the time you came in. By the time you came in as spokesperson, yourself and Mr. Garba Shehu, we just kept thinking about all of the other spokespersons that we've had in this country and what kind of shoes you had to fill. What was that like? I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you were asked to become spokesperson to the Buhari administration, you cried. Am I correct?
I did.
Because I remember you had just been elected for your second term as the president of the Guild of Editors.
Good. I'm glad you remember that.
And you started crying. Why were you crying? What was the problem?
I did, because it was like moving from the known to the unknown. From terra firma to terra incognita. Terra firma is a terrain you know. Terra incognita is a terrain you don't know. I was moving from terra firma to terra incognita. It was not what I wanted for my life. At no time did I ever aspire to work in government. I didn't want it. I didn't like it. I didn't think I would do it. But when I got that invitation from a man I had always loved and admired, I couldn't say no. No, I will serve President Buhari any day. So when that invitation came, I had to take it. I had to leave my job as managing director of a newspaper. I had to leave my job as editor-in-chief. I had to leave my job as president Nigeria Guild of Editors. I was just satisfied with the things I was doing there. I didn't aspire for anything. You know, one of the things about myself, I usually call myself NFA, no future ambition. I don't have ambition for anything. At any given time, you ask me, what's your ambition? I will say nothing. All the things that I have attained in this world by the grace of God, rising from a junior reporter to middle level to senior reporter to an editor-in-chief. It just came my way. God brought them my way. If you ask me, do you have the ambition to become this? I'll say, no. I don't have ambition to be anything. I didn't have the ambition to serve in government. I didn't have the ambition to be SA media to the president. It just came. Just like God does things for me, it was dropped on my laps. And I took it. So when it came, I wasn't sure what I was going to be there. I had my doubts. But because it was President Buhari, of course, you know, I will follow him into battle blindfolded. I so much believed in him, like I still believe in him today. So that was why I took it.
So let's talk about the job in itself.
That job. You don't want to do it twice in your life. In fact, you shouldn't do it twice in your lifetime. It was a tough assignment, very tough. Made a lot tougher by Nigerians, particularly those who see no good in anything that happens. It was a tough assignment, but I believe I gave it my best. At times, when people come after me, if I don't throw blows, I give them some jabs. But I think I did my best on that assignment.
Walk us through it. What is the job of a presidential spokesperson?
Okay, the job. Primarily, the job is you must let the country and even the world know what your president is doing. Information dissemination is a core part of that job. Anything the president does must be disseminated to the public. Information dissemination. That is why if you don't have media experience, I don't know how you are going to survive on that job. Because it's a continuation of your job as a media person. While in active media, I was involved in news processing and news dissemination to the public. As media advisor to the president, I was involved in providing content for the media to use. So you see the similarity in the assignments. So ensure that everything the president does gets publicized. That's number one. Number two, expand on whatever the president has done. You know, he just does it, he makes pronouncements, he leaves, he moves on to the next thing. Your job as a media advisor is to expand on those things so that all the nuances the public gets to understand. It's your job as a media advisor to do that. And of course, it's also your job to defend him. And that's what a lot of people don't want. It is your job to defend your principle. When people say things that are not correct, you must rise up to it and say, no, you are not right. This is the correct position. You must defend it. And that was the beef some people had with me.
So let's talk about that beef. Before I know there are so many other points you're going to get to, but let's talk about that beef. Because it was beef. The Nigerian public was beefing you. Well, it was because many people felt that as spokesperson, if he's doing something that a lot of people perceive to be wrong, you should tell him it's wrong. Did that opportunity ever come up to say, no, Mr. President, hold on this matter? No.
No. It was my job to defend Mr. President. I remember that my church, the First Choir Gospel Church in Nigeria, was turning 60. So they came to visit the president. And the general overseer, then Reverend Felix Meduli, told the president, we want to thank you for appointing one of our members as your special advisor of media and publicity. When the president was going to respond, he said, I'm the one that should thank him for coming to serve me. Because when his colleagues come after me, I go to hide behind him and he rises to the occasion. So you see, that is your job as a special advisor of media. You must defend your principle because people will always come after him for right or wrong reasons. You must be able to put this in proper perspective and defend it.
Is he never wrong? Is he never wrong?
If he is wrong, it's for me to tell him privately. If he is wrong, it's not for me to then go to the public to say, no, President Buhari was wrong on this. No, it's never done. It's never done. If he was wrong, I will mention it to him privately.
If he refuses to take the correction, you've spoken to him.
No.
Something that has a negative effect. And you say, no, Mr. President, hold on, this is not correct. And it is private. And he says, no, I want to do it like this.
It's not a man like that. Let me tell you something. The very day I resumed the assignment, he told me, he said, one thing I will want from you is the truth at all times. He said, you know, I'm a general. I can argue. If I argue, please argue with me. And if you are correct, I'll turn around to agree with you. So that's the thing. He is not a person that will stick to his guns, whether he's right or wrong. When you point out something to him and you have a superior argument, he agrees with your argument.
So we talked about two things, you just mentioned now to defend him. What are the job descriptions for his presidential spokesperson?
There are three things I said: inform the country about things he does. Two, expand on them so that there is a proper understanding of those things. And then thirdly, defend them when it's necessary. Those are the core things you do as SABD. Of course, there are other things, many other things. One part of that is the book I've written to let Nigerians understand who Muhammadu Buhari truly is.
Do you still speak with him? Are you still in contact with him often?
By the grace of God.
Many Nigerians have noticed that he's just not around. Well, we don't see him around. He threatened that he was going to do this. He did. I remember that he did. He said he was going away, and that we would not see him. He was going, and we thought, nah, you will still be around. We will still see you. We haven't. The only time we saw him was when you released your book.
Yes, he's a very jocular person. A lot of people don't know that side of him. That is why a chapter in my book is dedicated to Buhari's jokes. If you get the book, you will see a whole chapter in which I chronicled all his wisecracks, his jokes, and how he laughs. In fact, when I get to his office, when I'm leaving, he had a secretary there who asked me that, why is it that each time you come here, we hear the two of you laughing uproariously? That's the kind of person President Buhari was. A lot of people thought he didn't have a soft side, he didn't have a humorous side. It's not true. It's not true. He was a very jocular person. And what was the other side of your question? Okay, why you don't see him too often? President Buhari left just 11 months ago, compared to President Jonathan, who left 9 years ago, compared to President Obasanjo, who left since 2007 or 2008. So you can't compare him with other presidents. He is a very unobtrusive man. And when he was leaving, he said he would not stay in Abuja. Neither will he stay in Kaduna, which was rather near Abuja. He will go and stay in Daura, which was far away, because he doesn't want people to disturb him, and he doesn't want to be seen to be overbearing on the new administration. On the day I launched my book, January 16, 2024, President Tinubu said it, that since President Buhari left power, he had not got a single call from him, neither had he recommended anybody for appointment. That's President Buhari for you. Not all former presidents were like that.
His administration has been commended around the world for the handling of the, COVID-19 pandemic. And, many people have tried to understand, how did Nigeria handle it? Because it was a message of doom. Everyone was afraid because they said, oh, Africa, I remember the phrase, we were going to be dropping on the street like flies. And everyone was so scared. I remember then, we were, at least I was in the villa with you at the time. And I remember that we had to be tested. A lot of us took the vaccinations early. You wouldn't even be able to gain access if you were not vaccinated gain access into the villa. So we were among the first people to get vaccinated because we had to be around you and him almost every single day. But that particular handling of the COVID-19 pandemic has been talked about around the world. He has been commended for handling that. Could you walk us through what informed the methodology that the Buhari administration used to handle that COVID-19 pandemic? We'll start with that one, and then we'll now get into the economic impact that had on the country, because many people, when they hear COVID, they don't want to talk about COVID because please, it's many people still believe it was a scam. Please, we don't want to hear about that time they used us to make some money at the time. just so we can understand how it started, what methodology we used, and the impact it had on the people, and a response from you to people who believe that, please, this was just an avenue for people to make money.
Thank you. Yes, there was that doomsday prediction that Africa was going to take a mighty hit from COVID. And when you talk of Africa, you know Nigeria. Nigeria almost accounts to, they say, of every 4 African or that you see. No, that of a certain number of Africans you see, Nigeria will constitute 4 of them. Okay, so the fear was that Nigeria was going to take a hit from COVID. Therefore, the administration had to rise to the occasion, and they did all that needed to be done. There was a team set up under the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, and all the ramifications of COVID was looked at by that task force. Everything that needed to be done. When we needed to lock down, it was prescribed, the president approved it. When we needed to open partially, it was recommended, the president approved it. When we needed to open up finally, it was recommended, the president approved it. It got to a point that even ECOWAS made President Buhari the champion of the COVID fight in West Africa. Because ECOWAS saw the success being recorded in Nigeria, and it made President Buhari champion of the COVID fight in West Africa. The UN Secretary General had to commend Nigeria particularly and especially on how it tackled the COVID pandemic. So it was because President Buhari saw it as something that needed to be tackled and right from the presidency. So he showed the way, he showed leadership, and the country followed him. And at the end of the day, we didn't have too many casualties, to the glory of God.
For the second part of the question, when people do not care,
yeah.
They just think about how much money was used for this so-called pandemic,
Well, the question is, can you ever quantify the value of a life in terms of money? A life in terms of money. Those who lost people, unfortunately, to COVID will tell you what it took from them. I have a friend who lost 2 of his brothers to COVID. So, will you tell that kind of person that COVID was fraud? Will you tell that kind of person that too much money was spent on it? No, that person will never agree with you. Rather, we should be thankful that Nigeria had the money it needed to spend on COVID. We spent it, and we got results. Are we richer than America? America lost souls in millions during COVID. Didn't they spend money? They spent. But we spent money, and we got results. That is rather what we should be thankful to God for.
Interesting times we had. When you look back at those 8 years of the Buhari administration, what comes to your mind? What are some of the thoughts that come to your mind when you think back? And at the time when the 8 years ended, was it a relief for you? You cried to join. Were you dancing when you were leaving? Was it a relief?
It was a relief. It was a big relief. But before we left, the president couldn't wait to leave. He couldn't wait to leave. And some of us with him also couldn't wait to leave.
Why?
We had served our country, we had served to the best of our ability, and we were fagged out. In the last 2 weeks of that administration, I was almost sleeping on my feet. I'll be walking and I'll be dozing. Go and look at the schedule of those last 2 weeks. It was a killing schedule. How President Buhari survived it is miraculous. Things were packed back to back that needed to be done before we exited. It was tough. So
like what? Like what things? What things were so stressful to
Oh,
him leaving.
you needed to see commissionings all over the place. Commissionings all over the place. Customs headquarters commission, Second Niger Bridge commission, this road, this bridge, everything. Commissionings all over the place. In the final 2 weeks, it was tough. It was tough. So, a week to leaving, there was a regimental dinner of the military. President Buhari was there. When he rose to speak, he said, I can't wait for the next 1 week to pass. He was tired. I just wanted to go. And that was how I felt also. I just couldn't wait to leave. I had served 8 years. Before me, no special advisor of media has spent 8 years. None in a democracy. Some presidents use 3 as a media. Some use 2. None has stayed 8 years like I did. So, truly, I was tired. I was ready to leave. And I'm glad the day came and I left.
There were some hallmarks of the Buhari administration. We've talked about a few of them, in the course of this conversation. But it will be remiss of us not to talk about his relationship with fuel subsidy, because before he came in, there was a protest in Nigeria called Occupy Nigeria. And I'm sure a lot of people remember what that protest was about. It was about the removal of fuel subsidy. But yes, he didn't remove it, and then we now heard, it wasn't even added to the budget. It wasn't even present in the budget of the year when he left. Could you talk to us about this complicated relationship between the Buhari administration and fuel subsidy removal?
Yes, you need to recall that President Buhari had been oil minister for 3.25 years in Nigeria during the military. So he understood all the nuances of subsidy, whether there was subsidy or not, whether subsidy was actually true or it was fraud. He understood everything. One argument he kept making whenever the issue of subsidy came was that when Nigeria makes over $100 million per barrel from petrol, what does the ordinary man gain? Nothing. Nothing. So if oil prices now fall in the international market and subsidy has to rise, when you remove that subsidy, why must the ordinary man then bear the brunt? Why must he bear the brunt? When things were positive in the oil market, he got nothing. So when things go down south, why must he pay the price? That was his position throughout the administration. And at a point that it became clear that the subsidy needed to go, President Buhari was always thinking of the people and how it will affect their lives. He could have removed it in his last year in office, but he chose not to remove it. There were also political reasons, because the truth is that if that oil subsidy had been removed, it's possible that the APC would not have won the election, because there will be a revolt against the party in the country. So President Buhari combined economic reasons, social reasons, political reasons, and he didn't remove the subsidy.
It was a complicated relationship, and he was battered for it. Remember, everywhere he was. He was battered for it. My goodness, I remember almost everywhere. I don't want to mention names, but almost every symposium about corruption and the fuel subsidy scam, he took a bashing. Why won't he take the decision? Why would he take the decision? It is history now, isn't it? A lot has happened.
Yes, as former oil minister, he understood everything that was going on in the industry. He understood it. But he decided not to do it. And well, it's been done now, and we just pray that things continue to get better for the country.
He's been talked about again, Sometimes I wish I could just put a camera somewhere in his house in Daura and just see what he's doing, because he's been talked about again with the conversation about state police. Everyone has said that the Buhari administration was vehemently against state policing. And they've quoted so many areas where this complicated relationship between the Buhari administration also with state policing. Is that something that you can talk to us a bit about?
No, I'll just say that governance is a continuum. Whatever one administration didn't touch or didn't finish, another administration can always handle. The Tinubu government is in place now to handle matters about state policing. And I just wish that they would do what is best for the country.
Doing what is best for the country. That is one of the biggest conversations right now. What is best for Nigeria? All right, well, we do have to start rounding up. I still have so many things I want to talk with you about. Let's talk a little bit about you.
Okay.
You now, you have mentioned before that you call yourself NFA, and I understand this. There are many of us, myself included, but I don't know if I will go as far as calling myself NFA. But I guess you're not one of those, a struggler. Things you attract things and you rise to the occasion. That is the lot of many of us on this planet. Well, now you're home, you're watching us. We invite you for interviews now and again. How do you look at yourself in 5 years? If you were called to work in the Tinubu administration, would you agree? And what should we be expecting from you? Are you going to write more? Are you going to lecture? What are you going to be doing in, let's say, 5 years?
Yeah, thank you. With God giving us life, because nobody is sure of tomorrow. If it pleases God for me to still be here in 5 years, I'll be a very senior citizen. Because in 5 years, I'll be knocking hard on 70. So I think I should be retired at that age. I have a right to retire. Even now, I can retire if I want, but I think I still have some things to give, but not in government. Not in government. Having served the government for 8 years, I'll say I have done my bit. In a country of 200 million people, if you have a chance to serve for 8 years, you have done more than your fair share. Let others also do. That's what I would say. What again?
I guess you're right.
Oh, by the grace of God, that's my life. All my life I've been a writer. I would like to write more. The book I wrote on President Buhari was incidentally my second book. I had done one in 1992, which was on sports. I used to be an ardent follower of the Shooting Stars Football Club. I wrote a book when they won a African tournament then, the glorious age of the soccer team. That was my first book. And then this one on President Buhari is the second book. I would like to write more by the grace of God.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to these books.
You'll get.
I'm looking forward to these books, because, from many people think they know you from just the Buhari administration. I remember the first time I realized that you were the person behind Kuli Kuli at yahoo.co.uk. I couldn't believe. I couldn't believe that this is the man who, because at the end of that article,
yes,
I think it was was it the Vanguard?
No, the Sun.
It was the Sun. At the end of that, at the bottom, you see email kulikuli at yahoo.co.uk. And I'd always, because I grew up with newspapers who were reading newspapers. So I knew that email address. And then one day I got an email from kulikuli at yahoo.co.uk, and it was you. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that you were the one. Are you still going to do some work with the media? Are you still going to write articles? Is that
definitely. I'll still do some work with the media. I could have started since last year, but I had to take time off to write that book. We finished in May. I just rested for about 1 month. Then I traveled and I went to write that book. That book took the whole of last year. It was presented in January this year. Since after the presentation, we've been doing the marketing, and you won't believe how the market accepted that book. So we have been doing the marketing. We've got a point where the marketing can be like on autopilot now. So I think I'll do some work with the media. I had some offers, and I told them, please give me time. Now I'm ready. I'm quite soon you'll hear about me.
We'll be watching. We'll be watching. Thank you so much, Mr. Femi Adesina, for being with us on the program. And good luck with all your future plans, even though disappointingly they do not involve any politics. And
No.
because you are going to be writing, you doing work with the media.
Not politics. I don't think I'm caught out for that. In fact, I wonder how President Buhari survived in politics, because it was too straight and arrow. How he survived in politics, I can't understand. So I can play politics.
Not a big fan of Nigeria's political space, I'm getting.
No, I can't play the game.
Okay, well, some people were born for it. We'll be watching them while they do it. But thank you for your service, and thank you for speaking with us on the program.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
We have been speaking with former presidential spokesman of the Muhammadu Buhari administration, Mr. Femi Adesina. Please join the conversation online at channelstv.com. Leave your comments, respectfully, of course, and join us as we continue to ask the accountability question until it is answered. I'm Kayla Megwa. See you next time.